So we talk about what is an artist, and if you think about an art director has a vision, and the art director has a vision that they share with all the other artists in the group, and they make that art director's vision. So is that art director an artist? Yeah, probably the best artist in the group, even though there's other artists in the group actually making the work. Just like a conductor. Usually the conductor is the best musician in the whole group. So I think the confusion is what is a tool for making art and what is an artist.
Okay. Welcome to What is an Artist? This is an art talk around an art table about art.
Yeah, I guess I can introduce...
Should we start at the beginning?
Yes. Would you like to start at the beginning?
Introduce yourself.
Oh yeah, let's just introduce ourselves. My name's Shane. I'm a mason and carpenter, freelance videographer, photographer, and I enjoy having stimulating conversations, and this is hopefully one of those.
Absolutely.
We'll get back to you, Drew. I'm going to save the best for last.
Thanks, Shane.
My name's Monika. I am a neuroscientist, chef, fermentation enthusiast.
Right.
My name is Jason Town. I'm an artist, father, husband, and other things, but that's good enough for now. Here you go.
Drew Davis.
I'm Drew Davis. I am also an artist, among other things. We enjoy having interesting conversations, and we're going to have a conversation today about, well, what is an artist, and that involves this whole new AI phenomenon.
Yeah.
I think that what the conversation started the other day when we were talking to a friend, and he basically was making the point that if you create AI art, the person can't really claim to be the artist of it because he's using a tool to make it.
Yeah. So he was basically creating like a video game, well, like a game series, and then like a comic, as I understand it. Mm-hmm. And he would describe his characters, but not really be able to get the results he was looking for. So he's like, well, I'm commissioning the art. So I'm just the commissioner. And he says, I'm not the artist. And for me, that really, that kind of triggered me. Because I don't know do you know the quote that basically says everyone's an artist? You know, within us, there's an artist.
We have the potential.
Yeah. And so it begs the question, like, at what point are you an artist? And we even brought up, I'd love for you to bring up your story about being in the early days of Photoshop and Illustrator, because I think that brings up a good point.
So back in 1995. Back in 1995, I started learning how to use Photoshop when it was 2.0. And all the artists around me said that it was basically cheating. It was like, it was an effective tool to cheat your way into making artwork instead of seeing it as just a new tool set. So we talk about what is an artist. And if you think about an art director has a vision, and the art director has a vision that they share with all the other artists in the group, and they make that art director's vision. So is that art director an artist? Yeah, probably the best artist in the group, even though there's other artists in the group actually making the work. Just like a conductor. Usually the conductor is the best musician in the whole group. So I think the confusion is what is a tool for making art and what is an artist. So that's the confusion.
What is an artist, Jason?
I think someone who has creative ideas that they bring from their mind to reality with whatever means is an artist.
Okay, Monika, what's an artist?
Tell us.
What instinctually comes to mind for me is someone who creates, but I still think that an artist can't be defined. It's almost like an artist is defined by the observer of the artist. That's what's coming up for me.
Can I ask you,
Oh yeah.
ask you a question? So what do you think about the person who's making AI art? Can they claim to be the artist, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think they can if other people can kind of get on board with it.
Is it fair?
For me, as an objective observer, I would say so. I'm not emotionally attached to any kind of definition of art, and I think it's just a new way of looking at art and artistry because the term is so broad and it's constantly being redefined and evolving. So it's an interesting thought exercise almost.
So what just came to mind is when you said, "Is it fair?" Like at what point did it become about being fair? So like the quote of like all is fair in love and war and art. Add art to that, and I really love what you said because art is alive, and so the materialist reductionist definition doesn't really work for art because it's like this evolving thing. And so as soon as you think you know what an artist is, that's like, oh, well, now transcending that becomes the art. It's like, oh, you don't think I can become an artist with AI? Watch me. And watch this. And so I kind of barged into that one, but I got really inspired by the aliveness because that's feels so like trying to confine what an artist is seems silly, and like what's the point? Like why try to reduce it? But also I get the drive of like understanding and getting a clear idea of like at what point is the AI an artist, and is it an artist without soul or sentience? And that's when it becomes like a Rudolf Steiner question or something.
Well, I think that goes to the question, like, can a computer be an artist, or is that something reserved for humans? So, right, I think what it's an interesting conversation because an artist is kind of hard to pin down because it's more of an it's an energy that we as a living sentient being is putting forward. Unless you have another idea, can nature is nature an artist? Or
feels like the ultimate artist.
Well, yeah, is that maybe that's the source energy? Is this this creation energy, which is what we're pushing forward? And I don't know if you can ascribe that energy to a non-living, at least as of yet. AI is not sentient, right? It's not self-aware, and so it is another brain. And so I think I could see the answer on both sides. Like you're not really the artist because you're actually using another intelligence, another brain, and so it's a collaborative work. So if you just like if me and Jason were to do a painting together, I can't say that I'm the artist.
Are you sure?
Well, I can, but it's a half truth because
and then what's up with this reductionist viewpoint? Like we are the artist. Like the ego's like saying I am the artist, which is never really true. Like we were talking about this even with your paints. Like like the level of control is probably what defines the fineness of the artist, but also there's things within the paint on a molecular level where you have the shape of the canvas and the crunchiness or the elements within the paint that are defining these lines. You have the general paint stroke, but within that there's things beyond your control.
Yeah. I mean, let's
Get the mic up closer.
Okay. No, like, you're right. Like, when we're talking about this, the idea of randomness is in everything, right? So, like, even as an artist, as a painter, like, I'm using these tools and I'm putting my energy forward to create this thing. Yeah. But I'm never going to be able to recreate exactly that down to like the molecules of the paint's going to drip. I mean, there's so many variables even in something that seems to be controlled. Like even like colored pencil, like it seems very controlled. There's still randomness there because like you have texture of the paper and all this stuff. And so with AI art, there's even more randomness as of now. But the skill level involved to do that is it's a different skill level, which is a totally different set of skills. And so that's why I think kind of categories are important, right? So it's like in the category of AI, there's that level of that, there's that art form. and the skill level is more like programming. And I think maybe we're not there yet, but I think the randomness is going to get less and less as it develops and gets more just more advanced, to where you can code something and have it spit out a very similar thing every time. Because right now, like, you can give it a command and it'll be so different, right? It's harder to control.
Well, and that's kind of like the example of a director. If a great actor, you won't be able to fully know what they're going to produce. That's the point. It's like I give you this script and then you make it come alive. Like, there's something alive in me that had me write this script, and now it's like, okay, it's like a seed almost. And now the tree, based on its surroundings, finds its own unique expression, which feels like art. But like trying to define how that child or that seed defines itself, I don't know. It feels like it's like an interesting conversation of at what point is letting go of control part of the art form, and empowering, right? Empowering the elements. Like, a good sculptor will find the sculpture within the stone, not necessarily force the will of the sculpture on the stone, which might be like old Western mindset of like, I'm going to conquer nature, but in this more like synergetic mindset of like, what's alive in this stone that wants to be seen, or what the potential within it.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's the question too of what's the difference between creating intuitively and accepting something as random, because obviously there's a vision and then there's the creation, and there's going to be a gap between the vision and the creation. But what do you call random, and what do you call, oh, this was just intuitive? And this comes up for me with food a lot, because it's like you put something on a plate and you want it to be pretty, but then it's like, oh, you sprinkled this and it lands there, and it's like, is it intuitive or is it just random? And yeah, there's a dynamic between control happening. But for me personally, I'm really fascinated more by the process of creating. So like with AI, it's almost like the command that you give the AI is more of the art than the actual product that it makes. So that's what is fascinating to me, I think.
Yeah.
I have a quick question about, so you work a lot with fermentation, and in a way it's its own intelligence. And the way it digests food, whether it's koji or some, Jun starter, it's like the way you're giving it a circumstance to grow and create its own expression. You're still the chef, but it's like co-chefing with you, or how would you frame that?
There's an intelligence that she's using also with the fermentation.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's about kind of, I see it as working with Mother Nature, and you learn kind of the nature of the ferments as you work with them more. So it's learning and working together, and it feels very much like a collaborative process, even though I'm like making decisions and choices and exerting my control over nature. It's also letting nature do its thing and like tell me things, and learning from that experience too.
Yeah, so about randomness, here, let's do this. So about randomness, I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually had a guy come into my studio here, and he basically said that everything looked like a mistake. And I was like, okay, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, it just looks like you kind of mess around until something happens. Like, it all looks like a mistake. And it's like, no, not really. But I guess, from an outsider looking in, it could look like art is just a mistake, where you end up stopping at a point where you're like, okay, this mistake is done. It looks pretty, but it's actually not a mistake. It's trial and error. It's figuring out technique. It's stacking techniques. It's a lot of things. And then actually going back to, we were talking about what is an artist and what is art. That is terminology that the gatekeepers use to try and keep people in, keep people out, and say, that's not art, you're not an artist, or this is art and you're an artist. That's verbiage for the gatekeepers. Yeah. And there's no value in it. There's no value in that.
Yes. Just one moment, since the mic is headed this way. This gets me very excited because one realization I had is like people that I've noticed don't sing around the campfire as much or sing in the house and in a way all these like talent shows feel like gatekeeping of like showing us what talent is and now people are self-conscious about just singing around a campfire when that was just how it wasn't about being good. It was an expression of joy or sadness or love. And so anyways, I got really stoked when you brought that up because that sparks all sorts of ideas.
Cool. Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of created like a hierarchy almost. Like, it's why people are self-conscious because it's like you're now comparing, so like there's a comparison element. But what you were saying, Jason, about this guy said, he came in and looked like a mistake. Like, and when I'm like teaching my painting classes and stuff, I don't believe in mistakes, right? It's like a mistake is completely subjective. Yeah. Totally. And like someone could look at something and like you could analyze like why does it look like a mistake? Like someone could look at a drip, that's a mistake. Well, why? Because the drips in the past have been mistakes. That doesn't mean they can't be not mistakes, or if it depends on how you look at them. It's like Bob Ross, everything is happy little accidents. Like, and that's my perspective when I'm painting. Like if I do something that is unintentional that I feel like ruined something about the painting, I'll look at it. And I mean, there's some cases where like you can say that's like finished painting, and all of a sudden like a brush flies off and hits your finished painting and makes a big mark. Like, okay, like you can maybe say that's a mistake, or you could also say that it was just part of the universe. Yeah. And then what you're saying too is I think intuition is a really important element in art and creation, because that's a whole other topic itself. But like the intuitive energy, like we're tapping into something. We're tapping into like an energy that's not like this creative energy, this nature in a way. Like, and everyone who probably every human has experienced at some point like a flow state, right, where you're just like in this zone, and that's probably where creativity comes from, is that place ultimately.
Yeah.
And I don't think computers can have, I don't think AI can be called an artist.
Well, that's the question.
Well, that's the question.
Can AI be called an artist?
Right. Can you call a computer
an
artist?
Or at what point can AI...
I think it's really insulting to humans to call.
Can a raccoon be an artist? I've seen dogs make art and enjoy like painting.
Really though? Or do they really enjoy it?
It looks like it. Like the border collie was loving the creation,
or they love the fact that they're going to snack afterwards.
Well, but that's maybe just a human form of elitism, of like, ooh, only humans can. But then we talked about Mother Nature being one of the ultimate artists. So, okay, so humans and nature can be art, but a dolphin can't make art. Maybe, I don't know. And so gatekeeping, it goes back to gatekeeping. And so maybe you don't enjoy the dolphin's art.
What's the gate that's being kept?
I'd have to ask you, because you're wanting to keep a gate on who and what is and isn't an artist.
So as far as gatekeeping, when people say that if you plug in, a phrase and AI creates artwork, that the AI created the artwork and you put in the phrasing and you're not an artist and the AI did all the work. Well, if you come up with a specific phrasing to get the specific piece that you want, you created the art alongside with all the programmers and engineers who designed the AI to produce the work. And actually, it was kind of funny. I don't know if you ever heard this, but Jon Stewart, he said AI will reach sentience when the computer looks in the mirror and decides that it hates itself.
Okay. Well, I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to that. That's really interesting. I wanted to go back to randomness because I don't necessarily even believe, because you talked about, I feel like, I'm not trying to call you out, but I'm just trying to get clarity on the difference between randomness and then you're saying that there's no mistakes. Because for me, those statements don't match up. And so what science is called, like, oh, this is a random universe, like things colliding. And, well, there seems to be an intelligence to how things fit together and evolve and grow and interact. And then there's like this almost spiritual element to accepting, like, oh, a brush fell on the art and now that's part of the piece. There's like a beautiful acceptance and openness to that. That feels like there's almost an artistic consciousness to the acceptance of allowing other elements that are not necessarily under your direct control to become part of the art piece, which then relates to the AI and the inability to control it so directly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I heard the other day that this is kind of relevant to this, that randomness is basically, we call something random because we haven't found a pattern yet. So, yeah, so I mean, you could, so you're right, like randomness is not, I mean, I don't see randomness as a mistake. And we actually, as artists, we learn to control randomness.
Right.
Like
so it's not actually random.
No, like if I take a brush, dip it in like a bunch of wet paint and go like this, there's going to be a random smattering of paint that flies off of the brush. But you do that enough times and you can actually kind of harness some of that. Like I kind of know if you do it enough, like you actually can learn how to kind of wrangle that randomness together, which is kind of like, which is what these text prompts that do the AI computer, you're throwing into this, random generator.
Not random.
Well, no, I mean it's not random because it's being directed. So just like I'm holding the brush with the paint on it, I'm directing, and there's a random thing happening, or random, quote unquote, right?
Yeah,
because it's
quote unquote, not real random chaos.
It's only we only say random because we're human and we can't understand the vastness of the complexity of everything. Like you look at the molecules and how the air is moving around each droplet of paint and it's all vibrating and like, and there's a lot of cohesion. I mean, it's perfect order. So like, so does randomness exist?
So, from a neuroscientific perspective, humans always want to find patterns in everything. It's just the way the brain works, is it wants to see patterns. But undeniably, from a physical perspective, entropy is always increasing. So there is absolutely randomness, I think. But naturally, we want to see the order. So it's the relationship between accepting the randomness and controlling what we can, and also finding the patterns, and sometimes there is no meaning in anything, I think.
Why is he, or how is it you say that,
Mike.
that there is randomness? I mean, because we've found things that we thought were random, and then we realized that in fact they were, there's a lot of order to them. I mean, like what's an example that comes to mind for you that is randomness, that in its truest form?
Well, yeah, I agree with you. A lot of what we may define as random is just because there's a level of misunderstanding to what is actually happening. An example is not coming to mind of true randomness right now, but there's certainly just the way that nature works. There's some amount of disorder, I think. The way that molecules move. Yeah.
Is that because of our...
Mike?
Could that be because of our just not fully understanding things? I mean, I think something that comes to mind for me when you think about what's random is, fire, something burning, right? Like that is an explosion or fire? Entropy is what's the definition of entropy? It's the disintegration of, right? It's like the breaking down of order, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that?
Well, but it's like this.
Entropy is dissolving.
Dissolving, yeah. So
Right.
things are going in and out of. It's almost like a spring, or like something going around like stillness, right? Like Walter Russell, where it's like going out and radiating out. So radiation is entropy. Like radioactivity is an entropic force breaking down that they're able to like utilize, or like combustion, entropic force. But then like a river, where the river is spiraling into itself, and it's weaving in oxygen and hydrogen and actually birthing new water, or like birth itself, is negentropic, or what's the proper word for negentropic? Like a creative force, or there's a non-destructive, toroidally implosive word for that is more official, but it's like basically the opposite of entropy. It's like this creative force, and it's like this spring. It's like boing, yum, yum, yum. But the question about randomness is like, if I gave you a bunch of aluminum, how long, like a pile of aluminum, how long until that pile of aluminum randomly turns itself into a V10 Ford engine? So
Forever.
A billion years.
1 billion years. So, like when we're talking about random, like, well, okay, how long would it take for fire to break the law of, like, let's say I have a fire, and like, how long would I have to burn it until it breaks the laws of physics and turns into a butterfly or a bird? Or like, how random are we talking?
And is there evidence for that?
I think that gets out. I think that might get outside the scope of randomness. Randomness is, to me, like a loose plan or void of a plan. Like this what we're doing right now is very random. We didn't plan this. This is very random.
Or is it intuitive?
Yeah, well, I didn't plan. I didn't even know I would see you or you today. I didn't know I would meet you today. That's pretty random. But as far as like art goes, so like bringing it back to art. So there are artists who are like bakers, and there are artists who are like cooks. So the baker has to have exact weights and measures, and the cook just kind of takes a pinch of this and a pinch of that, and it seems more fluid, where as a baker seems to have more of a defined plan. And an artist who's painting realism, they're going to paint a painting that's going to look like a photo. There's nothing random about that. Nothing. Color selection, brush selection, surface selection, composition selection, like every brushstroke is planned. But if you're doing abstraction, expressionism, it's very random. It's very random because you're playing. Like when you're a kid and you just bring all these toys together, and all of a sudden you have this story develop out of all these random toys, and so I think, and like what you were talking about, a river where it's kind of vortexing all of this new life into it. That's what art can be if you allow some margins for random. And like what Drew was saying, like the random, the stabbing blotch of wet paint. You don't exactly know how it's going to drip or splatter, but you kind of do. So it's partially random, but it's partially skill. So random could just be zero plan. There's no fucking plan. So everything's random. Or you have such a plan that you hold on to with white knuckles where nothing can be random or it's wrong. So it's kind of like it's almost finding a balance between letting some of art be random or let some of life be random, and then letting some parts of life be planned out. Did I put everybody to sleep? Did I feel like I just put everybody to sleep.
No. Are you done? Or okay.
You're cool. F*** you. I'm out of here.